Ohio voters head out to the polls to vote on Issue 1, based on the fact that several members of the Ohio Parliament would like to make it harder to amend the Constitution, and a large amount of voter turnout is driven by the fact that our friends to the left have made it all about abortion. So we'll talk about that. We'll actually dig in and see if there's any truth to the fact that it's all about abortion, and we will see what is going to happen with that. Tu Thao is sentenced to almost 5 years for his role in George Floyd's death. I know that Fox 9 wants to say that George Floyd's killing. I'm going to say George Floyd's death, as people debate whether or not he was made an example out of in a situation like this, and we'll go over some of that and my thoughts on that, and hopefully some of yours. Niger's junta shuts the airspace down while France shuts down flights to and from the country of Niger. And on a rare social media jab, Niger actually gets in and tells the U.S. they don't want our aid. Instead, go back and, well, we'll talk about what's happened with that and where that goes. By the way, for Caster, I think that's the only tweet that I have for the day. And Anheuser-Busch is selling 8 of its big brands, because don't worry, everything is fine. It is going to be all of this and more. I was the one flying the balloons. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. I gotta remember, if I'm going to change the opening tagline and always have a song waiting there for that, I actually have to have a song prepared. Forgot about that. And I was getting through the cold open, and right at the end I realized, oh man, no, I didn't pick a song to speak spoken word, the lyrics of to do the cold open today. And you know, it's a growing process, because I've been using the I was the one flying the balloons since, when was that stupid crap anyway? Was that like March? So I've been using that for 5 months, but you know, we got to change some things up and actually make some things fresh around here. But we do have a lot of stuff to talk about here. There's even some Trump stuff at the bottom of the show here, but realistically, and one of the things that I've been noticing here is we get a little bit better audience retention when we're not talking about the Orange Man, because it is getting tiring. There is some exhaustion from that, but if we get to it, we'll be talking about what's happening there, including some things that are happening in Georgia coming up here. But really, realistically, we all know they're going to go find a way to put him in prison. They're not going to let him move his trial to West Virginia or anything else like that. But it's still important to the public record too, just not important to be a headline anymore. It's to that point where, like, oh, he got indicted. Woo. But we're going to get into it. We're going to get started. Let's get the live chat up here. Do feel free to chat about what you feel and how you see what's happening in our news stories today. This is not a Monday, so I will be reacting live as I can to the live chat as we go. So get what it is that you have to say in here. Be watching the scene when I switch over to make sure that it doesn't switch to mute. There is an edited version on the audio platform on YouTube and on Rumble that has the microphone muted segment taken out. So if you guys want to go check that out without having 2.5 minutes of no microphone, it is up. It is re-upped. I did private on YouTube. I privated the live stream version, so you guys go check that out if you want to go see what's there. Otherwise, you can take us on the go over on Spotify and go check it out over there. And before we get started, also make sure you guys go check out great programming such as the Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys, Tweets by Brit, Mr. Behavior, The No Gimmicks Podcast, Silent Caster, Clown World Chronicles with Papa Palpatine, and Overruled with KTZed, as we aim to bring you a better news and culture experience from the common man for the common man. That's right. For too long, we have had so much of our news and culture coming from people who hate the regular man, like you and I. Stop doing that. Stop getting your news and culture from those people. Get your news and culture from people who are just like you. So go check out all that great programming. Again, in the works right now, new programming coming from this channel, although I've thought about this a little bit more, and what I'm going to have a little bit of fun with this is going to be audio only. I've decided that there is going to be a YouTube premiere, and I'm going to invite whoever the guest is, because it's going to be a guest-driven show, to sit in and be in the live chat as we do the premiere, but everything is going to be pre-recorded for this. I've got some things to work on this. I'm working on getting a working title for it, but definitely something I've been wanting to do since I stopped doing conversation pieces. I'm going to be reaching out, seeing who I can have as the first guest on for that, but that's going to be some fun as well, so look forward to that and as we go. And let's get down into it, and let's get started with the news for the day. Not muted, not muted, not muted, not muted, not muted. Mogwai is over here. Hopefully the scene change doesn't mute the half the show tonight. It wasn't a half the show, it was 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I know, because I went back and edited it back out. Slide the bud to the left, slide the bush to the right. Now, Bud Light real smooth. Oh, we're doing the cha-cha slide. That would be one that'd be fun to have as my opening. Just a little spoken word segment of that. Or did you guys see, I don't know if it was going around on TikTok or I saw it on Instagram Reels where they had the religious version of the cha-cha slide. I might do that too, just for a goof. Just to see who's paying attention. Alright, let's get into the Dow. Let's get into our finance for the day. And by the way, tell like 10 friends that we're here and we're doing this. Mogwai says, I know it's a pain in the ass, but I laugh so hard when Streamlabs messes with you. And it's always on a Monday for whatever stupid reason. Alright, let's do this here from the Dow. The Dow spent the entire day down, but it was recovering from where it hit its bottom after the bottom dropped out at the very opening part of trading. The Dow ending up down 158.64 points, or just shy of 0.5%, to 35,314.49, with the futures looking fairly steady coming back off of this. Looking at the Bitcoin, which did pretty much the opposite. It started off flat and took a big spike that faltered off again before taking a more steady climb throughout the rest of the day with another falter, but a falter leaving the Bitcoin up a considerable amount today. $29,748 on the current Bitcoin, up $568.7 or 1.95% of the day, just shy of 2% gain on the Bitcoin. Hopefully some of you have a full Bitcoin here. Share the wealth if you do. But hopefully, even still, you've got a little bit of Bitcoin in your portfolio. I'm going to talk like Biden today, man. Hopefully you have a little bit of Bitcoin in your portfolio and you were able to come back out and make off a little bit with this. So Definitely some good news for that. Looking at the gas prices in the Madison area, it looks like my map is gone. That's what it looks like. It looks like my map is gone. There we go. Let's get that back up here. Wonder how that happened. I don't know if maybe I'm just running too wide open right now, but in the Madison area, 330 reigns supreme continued. It stays at 330 with a 346 outlier over on the west side, 350s across the isthmus, and a 350 outlier on the east side as well. So definitely some things to look at with that, hopefully. And I'm still waiting for that price to come down over here, but it just won't come down. We will see what's happening with that and where that goes. Your finance report today coming from CNBC. Dow sheds more than 150 points as Moody's Bank downgrades rekindles market sell-off from Alex Herring and Brian Evans. Stocks retreated Tuesday as August sell-off was reignited by a downgrade of the banking sector by credit rating agency Moody's. The Dow was down 158.64 points, or 0.45%, to close at 35,314.49. At session lows, the index dropped about 465 points. The S&P dipped 0.42 to end at 4499.38, bringing the broad index's month-to-date loss to almost 2%. The Nasdaq pulled back by 0.79% to 32, pulling its loss in August down to 3.2%. Tuesday was the fifth negative day out of 6 sessions for both the S&P and the Nasdaq. At session lows, both were down more than 1%. Though all 3 indices closed off their lowest respective points in the session, none ever broke into positive territory. Banks fell off broadly after Monday's downgraded credit rating on several regional banks, including M&T Bank and Pinnacle Financial. But don't worry, this is the strongest economy in history, citing deposit risk, a potential recession, and struggling commercial real estate portfolios. The credit agency also placed Bank of New York, Mellon, and State Street on review for downgrade. Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan slid about 2.1% and 0.6% respectively, while the SPDR S&P Bank ETF dropped 1.3%. The SPDR S&P 500 Regional Banking ETF also lost 1.3%. The Regional Bank ETF lost 28% in March amid the failure of Silicon Valley Bank. Meanwhile, M&T Bank finished nearly 1.5% lower. It's not optional to have good credit ratings because they need faith, said Jay Hatfield, CEO of Infrastructure Capital Advisors of Regional Banks. Any sort of reduction of faith in the regional banking system is really terrible for market sentiment. Traders also parsed through the latest batch of earnings. UPS shares slipped 0.9% after the delivery giant reported weaker than expected revenue for the second quarter. The company also lowered its full-year revenue outlook, partially because they have to go back and retrofit millions and millions of brown vans for air conditioning. That is going to add up in a hurry. So that is what we are seeing off our finance. Our layoffs report today coming from Forbes. 2023 layoff tracker. Tyson Foods Emergent Biosolutions cut hundreds of jobs, from Brian Bouchard. Emergent Biosolutions, the producer of the opioid overdose combating nasal spray Narcan, will cut 400 positions, the company announced on Tuesday, while Tyson announced plans to close 4 facilities. So, by the way, losing 4 facilities, that's not just taking out HR. That's taking out people on the ground. This is one of the, it's not the first where we've seen frontline on-the-ground employees instead of just middle management being out of here. This is going to be a big one where we do take out many people. It's going to put a clamp on the supply chain. It's definitely going to put a clamp in middle class and lower class workers' wages. And it's going to make the price of chicken skyrocket. So grab some chicken at this point. I got a freezer full of it because, well, although I haven't over the last few weeks, I've been finding better and more diverse ways to eat. Typically, especially if I'm on a pork kick, I live off Family Farms chicken breasts and Quick Trip salads. Which, by the way, most every Quick Trip salad has chicken in it, which means those prices are going to go up too. So, some things to look at with that. As employers continue to reduce their headcounts well into 2023 amid lingering recession fears. So, we don't have a number on Tyson, but we do have 400 from emergent biosolutions. But don't worry, again, everything is fine. Stop asking questions about it. Alright, let's talk about issue 1, or as I called it in the title, the left will make anything about abortion. Starting with CBS News today, Ohio issue 1, voters go to the polls in special election with major implications for abortion rights. From Melissa Quinn. Voters in Ohio are at the polls on Tuesday to decide whether to approve a measure known as Issue 1 that seeks to make it more difficult to amend the state constitution at the ballot box, and could have ramifications for a high-stakes plan to protect abortion access that voters will consider in November. Issue 1 presents a simple solution whether to raise the threshold required to amend the Constitution through the ballot box. Under the proposal, constitutional amendments would require the support of 60% of the voters rather than the simple majority currently needed. If approved, it would make it more difficult to amend the state constitution. A vote for yes supports the change, while a vote for no opposes it. My first weigh in on this, and number one, I cannot vote in Ohio. If you are listening to this, well, if you're listening back to this, it's already too late. It's already going in. But I do hope that you got out and made your voice heard on this. It should be harder to amend the Constitution in most cases, and I haven't read all 50 state constitutions, but I know what our U.S. Constitution does. I know what the Wisconsin Constitution does. The Constitution is the foundational document that limits the power of the government to fuck with your life. It should be harder to change it. It absolutely should be harder to make an amendment. Because if the threshold needed is number one, pass both chambers, and then number two, go to exactly 50% plus one vote, that is implying, especially in a bigger state like Ohio, that is pushing a lot of people's will down on another very large swath of the people. If your standard is only 50% plus one vote. I do think it should be 60. I would almost say it should be 67%, but 60 seems like a good round number for that. Issue 1 is the only matter on the ballot on Tuesday's special election, and polls close at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. So, right now, in fact. While the amendment will affect all future efforts to change the Ohio Constitution, the impact on the abortion rights ballot measure in particular sparked a flood of interest. Nearly 700,000 Ohioans voted early, either in person or by mail, surpassing the amount of early votes cast in the May 2022 primary election. Honkity honk 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 honk. Ohio Republicans began their push to raise the bar for approving proposed amendments this spring after the pro-abortion rights position won in all 6 states, where the issue directly put to the voters in the 2022 midterm cycle. Add a joint resolution to set the August 8th special election, moved through the state legislature, eventually passing in May. Reproductive rights advocates were collecting the signatures needed to land the abortion access measure on the fall general election ballot. GOP state lawmakers have touted the 60% majority threshold as a crucial for protecting the Ohio Constitution from well-funded out-of-state interests that seek to enshrine their social preferences and corporate motives in the document. Which, by the way, should be a statement that sits down and hammers this into the head of everybody else in Ohio. Even the liberals. Hey! Do you want Dow Chemical to be able to come in and do a well-funded push on propaganda and get 50% plus one with the ability to enshrine the right to dump toxic waste in your waterways? You know, a don't ask, don't tell. Which, by the way, is something that would never happen. But that's the same kind of example that people like our friends on the left like to bring up when they say corporatocracy in the government. Which is, again, why I say it should be harder to change aspects of your state's foundational document. But Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose, an ardent supporter of Issue 1, who is running for U.S. Senate, linked the amendment to the abortion rights ballot measure in May. This is 100... Oh, you fucking moron. This is 100% about keeping a radical pro-abortion amendment out of our Constitution. The left wants to jam it in there this coming November, LaRose, a Republican, said during a Lincoln Day event in Seneca County. What do you want to bet this guy's a plant like Marjorie Taylor Greene? That is the dumbest thing that you could say in a situation like that. You know how I know? Because our friends on the left turned around and made it all about abortion. On something, by the way, that under any other circumstance they'd be in support of, I would think at least. In Ohio, a ban on abortions after embryonic cardiac activity is detected typically around 6 weeks of pregnancy went into effect in the Supreme Court, after the Supreme Court overturned Roe last year, but a state court blocked the 6-week law, and legal proceedings are continuing. The proposed amendment, which has qualified for the November ballot, would protect the right of individuals to make their own reproductive decisions, including on contraception and abortion. It would forbid the state from prohibiting or interfering with the voluntary exercise of this right. The amendment would allow the state to prohibit abortion after fetal viability, which it defines as the point in a pregnancy when, in the professional judgment of the pregnant patient's treating physician, a fetus has a significant likelihood of survival outside the uterus with reasonable measures. Ohio's Issue 1 would not only raise the threshold for passing state constitutional amendments, but also elevate the standard to place a citizen-initiated amendment on the ballot. The amendment required that any petition filed after January 1st be signed by at least 5% of electors for each of Ohio's 88 counties, based on the total number of votes cast in the last governor's race. Ohio is the only state this year where voters weighed changes to the rules governing proposed constitutional amendments, and where the issue of abortion rights will directly appear on the ballot, but other states have mounted similar efforts, albeit unsuccessfully. In Arkansas and South Dakota, legislative measures that would have imposed supermajority threshold for the adoption of constitutional amendments both failed. Republicans in Missouri's legislature attempted earlier this year to replace the simple majority bar with a 57% marker, but failed to send the issue to voters for the final word. And again, I mean, this is a dream for leftoids. There's too much corporate interest in our government. We need to make sure corporate interests can't come in and change our Constitution. I have been with these people when they're saying these things. I used to be a leftoid. All right, local news on this one here from NBC4i. What to know before voting in Tuesday's Issue 1 election, from Daniel Griffin. Let's see how bad the local paper put their finger on the scale for this one. Plenty of Ohioans may have voted early for Tuesday's special one-issue election, but there's still millions of registered voters potentially headed to the polls. Polls open at 6:30 a.m. Tuesday and will close at 7:30 p.m. Anyone who's in line when polls close will be able to cast their ballots. If passed, Issue 1 would require all future constitutional amendments to win at least 60% of the votes to pass instead of the simple majority 50 plus 1 vote, which has been the process since 1912. Issue 1 would also change the process of getting an initiative on the ballot, requiring groups collecting signatures from 5% of registered voters in all 88 counties, an increase from the current 44-county requirement. An existing 10-day curing period for groups who did not gather enough valid signatures would be eliminated. According to the Franklin County Board of Elections, 46,674 people voted during the early voting period, with an additional 26,393 absentee ballots returned. Statewide, nearly 700,000 have already cast their vote. As with many special August elections in the years past, a voter's normal polling location may be unavailable due to a variety of reasons, and today's election is no different. To find your polling location, they have a link in here, But again, at this point, polls are closed. While absentee ballots should have been postmarked with Monday's date, there's still time to get those ballots in and counted by dropping them off at the Voters County Board of Elections by 7:30 p.m. Tuesday. The list of county boards of elections can be found below. Voters appearing in person to cast their ballot will need the following government-issued photo ID for laws that first went into effect in May's primary: Ohio driver's license, state of Ohio ID card, interim ID form issued by the Ohio BMV, Bureau of Motor Vehicles, U.S. passport card, U.S. military ID card, Ohio National Guard ID card, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs ID card. All photo IDs must have the following: an expiration date that's not past, a photograph of the voter, the voter's name, which must substantially conform to the voter's name as it appears in the poll list or the poll book. So, that is what happened with this. In fact, the results probably are starting to roll in. Issue 1 results. Yeah, I'm not surprised by that. The no's have it by a plurality, by almost 70%, 85.6 to 14.4. That's probably not going to change throughout the rest of the night. Because again, some moron went out and made it all about abortion. NBC2 Issue 1 election drives high voter turnout in the Miami Valley from Kajaza Hawkins and Kelly Kasich. I'll be checking on that throughout the next couple hours as well. So, thousands of voters across the state of Ohio have been flocking to the polls Tuesday, casting their ballots on Issue 1. This comes after weeks of early voting and heavy campaigning from both sides of the issue. According to the Montgomery County Board of Elections, there was a large turnout for early voting, and so far those numbers have stayed strong on Election Day. Voters say the issue at stake is driving the numbers. Wright University student Courtney Guy says the election appeals to all age ranges. As long as, everyone keeps getting together and keeps spreading the word about how voting is important, Guy said, I feel like that's bringing a lot of people in, especially younger people. Both the younger and older generations out in high numbers to cast the votes, which is something 88-year-old Christine Grant says she's been doing for decades. The people in Montgomery County, everyone has to go and vote, Grant said. If we don't go out and vote, because it's nothing to complain about, anything, if we don't get out to try to help ourselves. There has been some pushback on the statewide special election, especially after lawmakers changed their own previous ruling to prohibit August special elections, but that hasn't stopped people from coming out to vote in large numbers. And the last one here, just a little bit of image here, lines out the door as Ohio voters consider Issue 1. This is coming from a West Virginia news outlet, WSAZ3. And we do see the lines well out the door for this one. Partially, again, because a lot of your polling locations are closed for a special election. From Andrew Colgrove, voters in Lawrence County have been dealing with longer waits than they typically would see for a regular election. At Fairland High School, the line has extended outside at various times as voters head to the polls on Tuesday to weigh in on State Issue 1 in a special election. Some voters, WSAZ's Andrew Colgrove spoke with on Wednesday, say they came earlier in the day but left because the line was so long. Some reported waiting as long as an hour and a half to vote. God, I'm glad I've never had to do that. Even the few times I've lived in the city in my life, never more than 20 minutes. Ever. Oof. Mogwai coming in with the spice. DM Ryan says, hi everyone, taxpayers don't want to pay for abortions. The Mogwai says younger people can't vote because they were aborted. Grave humor. Mr. Scott is here. Ahoy. So I'm drinking on an empty stomach. Well, eat something. You goofball. So much good food in the world. Voters say the primary reason for this is not all the regular precincts are open for this election. They say there are only 3 locations where voters can cast their ballots. Some voters at Fairland also said there have been problems with the machines that have slowed down the process. Cole Grove heard from one woman who brought her elderly mother there this morning, who said it just wasn't realistic to expect her to be able to wait in such a long line that extended out into the summer heat. She says it's disappointing. The process of casting their ballots on this issue has felt this challenging. 84 precincts, and they've got 3 locations, said Sandy Joseph of Proctorville. Isn't that sad? We all see it, we all feel it, and so many people like this morning were on their way to work, so they couldn't stand in line for 100 people, so they took off and went to work so they won't get to vote. Well, realistically, most employers, and I don't know how it is in Ohio, but in Wisconsin, if you are in line to vote and it's a long line, if you do manage to have a long line, every employer that I've worked for has had a provision and an excused absence for that. I have some pork chops to bake after 7 p.m. Nice. I like pork chops. I made Parmesan garlic cream cheese chicken in the slow cooker yesterday. It smelled fantastic, and I've got leftovers for the rest of the week. It was really good. Anyway, that is issue 1. It should be harder to amend the Constitution. And again, even if abortion isn't the mainstay and the main part of what we have going on here, it should be harder. Absolutely. All right, let's talk about Biden's debt relief again. For the second day in a row, we have news on this. A really awesome sauce recipe for my pork chops. I don't know if you came back and joined the Discord again, because I know that you made a new Discord name, but I do have a recipe corner for that kind of stuff, if you have it. From the USA Today, Biden student debt forgiveness for defrauded borrowers blocked by conservative court. From Aaliyah Wong. A federal court on Monday blocked the new Biden admin rules aimed at forgiving the debt of student borrowers who attended colleges that misled them or closed suddenly. The move by a U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit by a panel comprised of Republican presidential appointees was in response to a request from career colleges and trade schools of Texas for a nationwide injunction on the new version of so-called borrower defense rules. The Biden admin's version of the rules ease and clarify the process for securing that relief, including by allowing borrowers to submit claims if they believe they were misled by their institutions. CCSU represents private career-oriented or trade schools in Lone Star State, many of them for-profit colleges. That is something, by the way, that I don't agree with. And I went to a for-profit college. And when I thought, because I didn't know when I was going into it, because I was 22 and I knew absolutely nothing about the world. But when I found out where I went was a for-profit school, I almost dropped out right then and there. Individuals who attend for-profit schools are disproportionately likely to take and default on student loan debt, in large part because they are promised lucrative outcomes, but have a track record of seldom producing these results. Federal policies have been developed over the years in an effort to relieve such borrowers of that debt. Yeah, and again, I'm not going to name the names of the school, but the school that I went to definitely fell under that umbrella. You can make $100,000 a year turning a wrench on your first year because you'll be so fast at flat rate. Bullshit. Nobody in their first year is going to be able to come back out and do that. Especially when you're taking literally anybody who can come in and fog the mirror and say, hey, we'll make a mechanic out of you. The U.S. Department under President Biden has worked to add to that pile of policies, including with its own borrower defense to repayment rule. Through borrower defense to repayment, or borrower defense for short, students who have been defrauded by their schools have their loans discharged. When CCSD filed the suit earlier this year on behalf of more than 70 Texas institutions, it said the Education Department's rule was created with a thumb on the scale to maximize the number of approved claims and ultimately further the admin's loan forgiveness agenda. Loan forgiveness for defrauded borrowers has been hard to come by. Federal laws long allowed for the discharge of loans from borrowers who have been misled or defrauded by their colleges, but getting the loans canceled has been an arduous and, in many cases, involved lawsuits against the federal government. Biden has been applying this authority incrementally in a settlement for a case that traces back to the Trump presidency, known as Sweet versus Cardona. Biden agreed to forgive $6 billion in debt relief for nearly 300,000 borrowers, for example. That relief isn't affected by Monday's injunction. Still, the group behind that push for relief was frustrated by the block of the Biden-era rule. It's necessary to protect students from being scammed, and it ensures the predatory actions come to light and are stopped before they go on to harm even more students, said Eileen Connor, president and director of the Project on Predatory Student Lending, in a statement. So let's talk about this for a second, because I disagree entirely with the concept of going to a for-profit school, and if I find out that somebody is going to the same school as I am, I actively talk that person out of it. A female friend of mine, a little bit younger than me, told me that she was planning on going to the school that I went to, and I talked her out of it because it was a for-profit school. You will, by the way, on 99 out of 100 instances, do better if you go to your local trade school or tech school and get your education that way. There are a few people that thrived going to UTI. Oops, I wasn't supposed to say that out loud. But there are a few people out there that thrived going to that school. Or Wyoming Tech, for that matter. Wyoming Tech was one of them that actually was given relief based on the predatory practices and the promises of high-priced and high-paying lucrative careers at the end of it. And while I understand and I actively try to talk people out of going to these schools that are for-profit and taking, again, whoever can fog the mirror, pumping them through as fast as they can with the promises of big greenbacks that you'll be able to pay off that huge student loan in just a second. In the situation that we're in, I can also see, there's a legitimate damage claim coming from these schools. As much as I disagree with them from a legal and a lawyer's standpoint, there is a legitimate damage claim coming from these schools because the Biden admin is coming out and saying outright, the government is saying these schools are bad, don't go to them. The government is picking and choosing winners and losers and actually doing financial damage to the prospect and the ability for these for-profit businesses to make money. And this is different from going to DeVry or something. I think it was DeVry that had the one that shut down, and basically people weren't getting their degrees or having their credentials honored after the school shut down because it went bankrupt. There is a major difference between going to a school that shut down and basically took your money and ran, and going to an actual operating school where, while it is not, you're not going to get the promise. If you come into a school like Wyotech or something and you know absolutely nothing, you are going to pick up skills. They won't be the best skills, and you will not be the top of your mechanic shop. No matter what the recruiter tells you, if you know absolutely nothing, their rigid structure will get you somewhere. But for somebody who at the time had 7 years experience going in, I was going for the credentials, it wasn't that. All in all, the admin has forgiven roughly $14.7 billion in loans for defrauded student borrowers. Nearly 500,000 borrowers had submitted borrower defense claims and had pending applications as of January 2023. The ruling on Monday delays the start of Biden's regulations, which also include automatic relief for borrowers whose institutions were closed. And again, that one I agree with. I don't like the fact that the government's putting money out of there, but it is a protection the government's putting out there for people who, again, legitimately went to a school and they took the money and ran. And I do hope that there is a mechanism for the government to come back and say, hey, you stole from these kids, give it back, instead of it coming off the taxpayer. Now, I know under the Biden admin it's going to come off the taxpayers' back, but Mr. Scott says, you can know all and still end up working minimum wage. And DM Ryan says, learn to kiss ass. Yes, exactly. But that is what is happening with that. Let's talk about 2Thou. Local affiliate, KMSP, Fox 9, reporting first. 2Thou was sentenced to over 4 years for his role in George Floyd's death. From Fox 9 staff. The fourth and final former Minneapolis police officer charged for his role in Floyd's murder was sentenced in court on Monday. 2Thou was sentenced to 57 months, or 4 3/4 years in prison, with credit for 340 days served on Monday. So, 3 3/4 years. Just 3 months after he was found guilty of aiding and abetting manslaughter of Floyd's death, Judge Peter Cahill shared his frustration with Thou, giving him a longer sentence than the 51 months the prosecutors requested. Man, do I have a problem with that. But this is the same reason I have a problem with Judge Chutkin, too. If the state and the people only seek X amount of punishment, it should not be the judge's purview to go above and beyond that. Man, do I have a problem with that. The only direction that should go is down. The judge looks at that and says, okay, well, we know that it's your first time, and the prosecution is seeking 3 years, 36 months. I think that you can do this on a year. I was hoping for a little more remorse, regret, acknowledgement, or some responsibility and less preaching, Cahill said to Thou during sentencing. Thou was already serving 3.5 years on federal charges for depriving Floyd of his civil rights. That is another big problem I have. That is a run around double jeopardy. And that is also wrong. Just last week, the U.S. Court of Appeals denied Thou's appeal of that case. Surprise, surprise there. He was ordered to serve his 2 sentences concurrently. Chauvin was convicted of state murder and manslaughter charges in 2021 and serving 22.5 years. He also pled guilty to a federal charge of violating Floyd's civil rights and was sentenced to 21 years, which was a mistake on his side of that, I will tell you. He is serving the sentences concurrently. In February 2022, a federal trial judge found Thou and former officers J. Alexander Kueng and Thomas Lane guilty of violating Floyd's civil rights. Kueng was sentenced in federal court to 36 months in prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release, while Lane was sentenced to 30 months in prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release. The former Minneapolis officers faced additional charges in state court for their role in Floyd's death. Kueng pleaded guilty in October 2022 for aiding and abetting manslaughter and received a sentence of 42 months, which will run concurrently with his federal sentence. Meanwhile, Lane pled guilty in May of 2022 to aiding and abetting second-degree manslaughter and received a sentence of 36 months in prison, which will also run concurrently with his federal sentence. Thau's state conviction followed a rare stipulated evidence trial, leaving his conviction in Cahill's hands. In May, Cahill returned with a guilty verdict after both the prosecution and defense laid out their arguments in court filings. And without typical courtroom testimony, Judge Cahill also presided over the trial of Derek Chauvin. And by the way, I'm going to tell you right now, they made an example out of Thau. Don't you dare take something like this that has federal headlines to trial, or I will throw the book at you in extra months. Lane, 3 years, 36 months. Coombe, 42 months. Thau, 57 months. And he was the only one that took it to trial. They made an example out of him. And by the way, I really hope that this all goes to the Supreme Court. But that is where they are going with that. Speaking of the Supreme Court allows continued regulation of so-called ghost guns. Ooh, it's scary! From Shannon Bream, Bill Mears, and Chris Pandolfo. This one is a little bit of a direct interest to me because, well, I have no interest in owning a ghost gun because if I'm going to spend $3,000 to build the 1911 of my choice, I will be following the rules to the letter because, well, I'm coming to a point where $3,000 isn't a ton of money anymore. Or I'm coming to the point where it's actually starting to even out for me. And I actually have some money in savings every once in a while now. Thanks to viewers like you in part, by the way. Do feel free, if you are on either Rumble or Twitch, to go back and throw me a sub. That's $2.50 right in my pocket. Or the bits. I know that Mogwai likes to throw the bits. Or if you're on Rumble too, and I don't know how the Rumble rants and the donation system works over there, but I do know that I have money in the bank over on Rumble because a couple of you have left a Rumble rant for even just $1. $1 helps. If you guys want to do that over there. YouTube, I don't have any monetization on because I don't want Google to get a portion of that. I have some links, but I think most of them are dead in the chat because I closed most of those accounts because they were scammy. Like the Buy Me a Coffee. And the PayPal because, well, PayPal went away because I can't afford $500 every time I say something on YouTube that PayPal doesn't like. But the point of what I was saying is I am not going to spend $3,000 on the 1911 of my dreams, which is a replica, by the way, of the Light and Shining Darkness from Fallout New Vegas's Honest Hearts DLC, just to have the government come back in and take it away with no compensation. So I will be following the laws on a lower build to the letter when I do this. The U.S. Supreme Court has sided with the Biden admin, temporarily allowing enforcement of regulations over so-called ghost guns that can be made from kits at home. The admin appealed the federal judge's earlier ruling, tossing out the regulation in a 5-4 vote. The High Court that put the ruling on Texas on hold. While the case is appealed further on merits, the regulation will be enforced while the case is appealed to the 5th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans and possibly further to the Supreme Court. Thomas, Alito, Gorsuch, and Kavanaugh would have allowed the lower court ruling to go into effect. The federal regulation was put into place a year ago and would make ghost guns under the same control as other fully assembled firearms, making it easier to trace serial numbers, background checks, and sales. The rule requires unfinished parts of a firearm, like the frame or the receiver of a long gun, to be treated like a complete firearm. These parts need to be licensed and must have serial numbers. Again, while I don't really care for the idea of the government being able to go back and track your firearms because it's none of their goddamn business, To lose $3,000 like that in a hurry would be a big loss of profit. And anything that's worth doing is worth doing for profit. The rule also requires manufacturers to run background checks before selling these parts, as they are required to do so for whole commercial firearms. The Biden admin argued the rule is necessary to respond to the rising numbers of untraceable guns. The DOJ told the court that local law enforcement agencies seized more than 19,000 ghost guns at crime scenes in 2021, a more than tenfold increase in just 5 years. I've got this feeling that that's not true. Again, before I drop $3,000 worth of coin into the 1911 of my dreams, I will make sure I am fully compliant with the law because, well, let's just face it. I am not going to have the light and shining darkness with John chapter 1 verse 5 engraved in Greek on the slide be part of some ATF agent's kids video game collection. That's a thing that's not going to happen. But as for right now, if you are in the midst of a build, do check your local laws and federal laws to make sure you are still in compliance. We've got the names of the people who got on, which, I mean, it's not hard to figure out because we just got the names of the 4 people who would have allowed to go into effect. But from CNN, Roberts and Barrett join liberals as Supreme Court revives federal ghost gun restrictions. Remember, these people are not your friends. They are still the government. No matter how many rulings they make that you like. From Ariana DeVogue. The Supreme Court on Tuesday agreed to freeze a lower court order that bars the government from regulating so-called ghost guns, untraceable homemade weapons as firearms under federal laws. What else would you classify them as? Like, I'm not trying to be mean when I ask that, but it uses fire to become an armament. What else would you call it? The brief order grants the Biden admin's request to allow the regulation to remain in effect while the legal challenges play out. Ghost guns are kits that a user can buy online to assemble a fully functional firearm. They have no serial numbers, do not require background checks, and provide no transfer records for easy traceability. Critics say they are attracted to people who are legally prohibited from buying firearms. I should call my uncle. I know that my brother-in-law doesn't know the regulations behind it, or didn't have the answer when I asked him. I should call my uncle, because his FFL, he is specifically set up as a gunsmith, so he would actually probably know. I wonder if he's watching right now. I know he watches here sometimes. I'll know if my phone starts going off. And everybody on Instagram, both now and on the replay, will know it too. The vote was 5-4. Chief Justice Roberts and fellow conservatives Amy Coney Barrett joined with the court's 3 liberals to allow the rule to take effect. So, again, if you are planning on doing a build, check federal law to make sure that you are still in compliance. I would hate for you to have your dream firearm being the collection of some spoiled ATF agent's kid. Because I want you to keep your hard-earned money and pay some of it to me. From the New York Post. Massachusetts governor declares state of emergency over migrant influx, from Ryan King. Democratic Mass Governor Maura Healey declared a state of emergency on Tuesday over the flood of migrants pouring into her deep blue state and straining emergency resources. You know, like they've been doing to Texas for 40 years. Healey urged the federal government to step up in support for the crisis, which she claims has caused a severe lack of shelter availability. I'm declaring a state of emergency in Massachusetts and urging my partners in the federal government to take the action we need to address the crisis, streamlining the work authorization process and passing comprehensive immigration reform, she said in a statement. According to the Commonwealth officials, there are currently around 5,600 families, more than 20,000 individuals in state shelters. Many of these families are migrants to Massachusetts, drawn here because we are, and probably have been, a beacon of those in need. Healy wrote in a letter to Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas before going on a call for the Biden admin to remove the burdensome barriers keeping people from getting work authorizations, address our outdated and punitive immigration laws, and provide much-needed financial assistance to help states like Massachusetts address the national issue. See, the problem is, you expected these people to stay in Texas, which didn't want these people. So you could come back out and say, open the borders. Give us your tired and your poor and your needy. As long as they stay in Texas and Arizona. Or go to places like Wisconsin or Wyoming. Bring those people there. Do not bring them up to here. We have such a rich culture up here already. But we're proudly sanctuary cities, and if we do have some of these poor and needy people come into here, we will block federal authorities from coming in and taking them away. Well, congratulations. Now you have 20,000 new people in a relatively small state. Interesting observation. I think I've told the story before, but interesting observation about Massachusetts, and I lived there for 2 years, is that while I lived there, and this was 06 to 08, while I lived there, I only ever met one Mexican. Now, being from Wisconsin farmlands, I have no problems with Mexican people. And I've met a lot of them throughout my life. Some of them are pretty cool people. Got some pretty good looking women too, by the way. I met so many people from every other South American and Latin American ethnicity and background. Only one guy claimed to hail from Mexico. I mean, Puerto Rican, Brazilian, Chilean. I was in breaks class with 3 Chilean people. Guatemalan, El Salvadorian, Ecuadorian, Colombian, Argentinian, Cuban, of course, a lot of the island folk. But only one, his name was Juan, hailed from our neighbor to the south. I'm willing to bet with numbers like this, that demographic has changed a little bit. Many of these families are migrants to Mass, drawn here because let's see, I read that already. These new arrivals are desperately want to work, she added, and we have historic demand for workers across all industries. The Mass Declaration follows similar pronouncements by New York State and City of Chicago in recent months. I hate to tell you this, but you get what you voted for. Again, it seems like you wanted these people to just stay out in Texas. Well, how did that work out for you? Mr. Scott says, or you could be a total dummy and have powerful friends and make millions. Nancy Pelosi. Yeah, that's true too. Anyone notice that Bill Gates doesn't have a GitHub? I don't know what GitHub is. What is GitHub? I've heard the name before. It's a software company. I don't know what GitHub does. Again, I've heard the name before. Platform and cloud-based service for software development and version control using Git, allowing developers to store and manage their code. I would think that Bill Gates probably doesn't have a GitHub because he has Microsoft. But that's just me. All right, more election news here. Ron DeSantis in the hot seat. Florida man Ron DeSantis replaces his campaign manager as he reboots his presidential bid. And typically when you're this late into the cycle and you're starting to do a bunch of reboots, you're done. You're floundering trying to get those last minute donations in, hoping you can try this again in the next election cycle, but typically you're done. Yeah, GitHub is where programmers share programming, okay. I don't know how to code, so it's not something that would be on my radar, unfortunately. I know a little bit. I could do some BASIC when BASIC was still something people used in the 90s when I was doing coding, but just that, for me, it was just rudimentary stuff. I never went further beyond it. I still look back and wish that I had, but I never went back further beyond that. This is from Matt Dixon and Jonathan Allen. Florida man Ron DeSantis is shaking up his campaign leadership, bringing in James Ootmeyer, his longtime chief of staff, as his new presidential campaign manager. The latest move in a reset that's now almost a month in the making. Out is Janera Peck, who served as DeSantis' campaign manager through his 2022 re-election and during the tumultuous first 3 months of his presidential campaign. DeSantis trails Trump in most public polling, and he's already laid off 40% of his initial campaign staff in an attempt to cut costs. Governor DeSantis has to change the dynamics. That much is clear, DeSantis donor Dan Eberhardt said. This is a realignment rather than a reset because both folks were already senior advisors. Peck, whose exit was first reported by The Messenger, will stay on as a senior advisor. NPC News first reported that top DeSantis allies were pushing for the change at the top of the campaign as his launch did not go as well as expected. Ootmeyer, chief of staff in DeSantis' formal office, will serve as campaign manager at a key moment for the campaign. Top aides see the first debate scheduled for August 23rd in Milwaukee. Oh crap, and I'm going to be driving through there later on that weekend as a key moment for DeSantis to regain some momentum and try to close the gap with Trump. By the way, is that going to be a primetime debate? Because that might be our show for whatever night that is. (9 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time), so it will be starting right at the end of Contemporary. Make a phone call for that. See if we can get some commentary coming from that. Peck, whose exit was first reported by The Messenger, will stay on as a senior advisor. NPC News first reported that top DeSantis allies were pushing for a change at the top of the campaign as his launch did not go as well as expected. Yeah, again, if you're making this big of a change at the end, or at this late in the game, you're probably just about done. It was too bad. If he would have had some patience, I think he would have done well. Both for the people of Florida through the rest of his term there and in 2028. I actually think he would have done fantastically if he'd have just held on for a little bit. Let's talk some more immigration stuff. New York City immigrants ticked off about migrants crammed into the neighborhood rec center. What the hell, man? From Haley Brown and Jorge Fitzgibbon. The thousands of migrants recently flooding into the Big Apple are facing a new round of pushback from New York City's immigrants. First-generation Brooklyn immigrants were up in arms Sunday over City Hall jamming dozens of newly arrived male asylum seekers into the Sunset Park Rec Center, saying the facility has long been a beloved community staple until now. People are really upset from the community, said a first-generation Chinese immigrant who only gave her name as Chen. All the people who use this facility from this community. So right now, you take away all the benefit to us and give it to them. What the hell? An estimated crowd of at least 300 local residents demonstrated outside the Sunset Park facility as they prepare a petition to present to Mayor Eric Adams and city officials. You get what you vote for. Remember, Mayor Eric Adams told you that this is a sanctuary city, and they will block any federal intervention. Most of the people in this community are immigrants themselves or the children or grandchildren, said Diker Heights resident Paul Rodriguez, adding that his family uses the rec center. Not anymore, they don't. Keep in mind that many of the people who are protesting in particular are now people who probably had a much longer, much more arduous journey than any of the ones who are coming here now. He said, let's be honest. Boy, that doesn't sound very liberal. Now that they're here, you have to do better than just simply deflecting the blame, pointing fingers, and saying, it's all the fault of Washington, and they better fix it for us. We have no more room, he said, referring to officials. Boy, that's not very liberal. Hey, remember? Give us your tired and your poor, your huddled masses. Remember that? That was the entire talking point for the entirety of the Trump presidency. Hey, what happened to that? Vincent Luce at the rec center, which has a pool and other facilities, is used by a lot of elderly people in the neighborhood who pay to become members. All of a sudden, they've been denied access at lieu of 40. We've collected 100 signatures to show the government that a decision like this impacts the community. The community should be a part of that, he said. This is already an overcrowded community. They can't just do this. And it's a low-income community, and they put this burden on our community. Hey, does anybody have any popcorn? Because this might get interesting yet. Speaking of immigration, where we will probably get our next source of migrants and refuge seekers. From the Associated Press, Niger coup leaders refuse to let senior U.S. diplomat meet with nation's president. I thought there was another story above this. Apparently not. A senior U.S. diplomat said coup leaders in Niger refused to allow her to meet Monday with the West African country's democratically elected president, whom she described as under virtual house arrest. No, it's actual house arrest. Acting Deputy Secretary of State Victoria Nuland also described the mutinous officers as receptive to U.S. pressure to return the country to a civilian rule. Yeah, that's what happens when your president is weak. When you go in there and try to make demands after weakening your military, the military leaders look at you and say, hey, get bent. They were quite firm about how they want to proceed, and it's not in support of the Constitution of Niger, Nuland told reporters. She characterized the conversations as extremely frank and at times quite difficult. She spoke after a 2-hour meeting in Niger's capital, Niamey, with some leaders in the military takeover of the country that's been a vital counterterrorism partner of the U.S. In speaking to junta leaders, Nuland said she made absolutely clear the kinds of support that we will legally have to cut off if democracy is not restored. If the U.S. determines that a democratically elected government has been toppled by unconstitutional means, federal law requires a cutoff of most American assistance, particularly military aid. Okay. Where do we sign? She also stressed the U.S. concern for the welfare of President Mohamed Bazoum, who she said was being detained with his wife and son. The meeting was with General Moussa Salou Barmou, a U.S. trained officer, and 3 of the colonels involved in the takeover. The coup's top leader, former Presidential Guard head Abdurrahmani Tchiani, did not meet with the Americans. I don't know if, by the way, Vicky knows this or not, but that was the ultimate snub. The leader of the new government that's in place right now sent other people to tell you to go kick rocks. He didn't even have time to come back and do it himself. And you think you're going to get through to these people and get Mohammed released? You're out of your mind. In other developments, on Monday, leaders of West Africa's regional bloc said they would meet later this week to discuss next steps. The junta defied a deadline to reinstate the president. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday in Abuja, the capital of neighboring Nigeria, according to a spokesperson for the ECOWAS bloc. Meanwhile, the junta's mutinous soldiers closed the country's airspace and accused foreign powers of preparing an attack. Well, they kinda are. State television reported the junta's latest actions on Sunday night, hours before the deadline set by ECOWAS, which has warned of using military force if Bazoum is not returned to power. A spokesman for the coup leaders, Colonel Major Amadou Abdrahmani, noted the threat of intervention being prepared by a neighboring country and said Niger's airspace will be closed until further notice. Any attempt to fly over the country will be met with an energetic and immediate response. The junta also claimed the two Central African countries were preparing for an invasion, but it did not name them. It called on Niger's population to defend the nation. Yeah, I don't really think that they care what it is you have to say. And also, I only put through this in here because it was hilarious. Jackson Hinkle reporting breaking. The revolutionary government of Niger has responded to the suspension of U.S. aid by telling the U.S., "We don't want your money. Use it to fund a weight loss program for Victoria Nuland." Yeah, I don't think they care what it is that you have sent your diplomat over to say. Hey, I have an emoji in my name. It's the microphone. From France 24. ECOWAS chairman says diplomacy is the best way forward on Niger crisis. You know, I actually agree with that statement. I think diplomacy, under most circumstances, is the best way forward on any crisis around the country. Around the world, I should say. If we had a little bit more diplomacy, we might not be doing a proxy war in the Ukraine right now. But I also want to remind you that the junta, at least on the US side, just basically told our Assistant Secretary of State, or Deputy Secretary of State, where she could shove her diplomacy. Just a reminder. Nigerian President and current ECOWAS Chair, Bola Tinubu, said on Tuesday that diplomacy is the best way forward to resolve the crisis and coup hit Niger. The statement came after the junta in Niamey said it could not host a mission from West African bloc for security reasons. Anthony Blinken earlier told France 24's sister radio station RFI that diplomacy is a preferred way to resolve the situation. And they do have a live blog going off with this here, but yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about, is that diplomacy is the best way forward until they come back out and tell you to shove your diplomacy up your ass. Yeah, I could see that. BLM works the same way MK Ultra does. I could see that. Air France suspends flights to, I am going to butcher this name, maybe not, Ouagadougou and Bamako after Niger airspace closure. From Reuters staff. Air France has suspended flights to and from Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, and Bamako, Mali until August 11th. The company said on Monday after Niger's junta closed its airspace on Sunday. A spokesperson added that Air France expects there to be longer flight times from sub-Saharan hub airports. And that's it. Let's just look at the old map here. I asked the Porch Boys if they would do a show talking about what's happening on Niger. Mostly because I wanted to hear what Midget B had to say about it. And, well, I probably can't say what he said on YouTube. Even though he probably would. Alright, so to the map. It is interesting that they're closing flights to Mali and Burkina Faso. Because for most places in France, you can get there to most places in these without going over Nigerian airspace. You might want to be careful around this leg of Burkina Faso, but for the most part, you can do it. And they actually cut off travel to Bamako too, which is interesting because that's far, far away from Niger. But I can see delays coming for sub-Saharan Africa, this area down here. I don't know why anybody would want to fly there, but because the majority of this is pretty war-torn right now too. I wouldn't go there. Some diplomatic things from the Associated Press again. Local businesses in northern Nigeria feel the sting of regional sanctions against neighboring Niger. How much of this can I read on YouTube? Not all of it. I do understand where you were going from. That's why I said I could see that. I do get it. And I think you're going down the right direction. I think that there's some pushback that can be done, but again, not on a YouTube stream. But I don't think you're going in the wrong direction either. Local businesses in northern Nigeria feel the sting of regional sanctions against neighboring Niger. Yeah, they're going to be feeling it. And they are very Western aligned too, so maybe not necessarily down here, but definitely up here they're going to be feeling it. I feel it too. Local businesses in northern... Oh, I read the headline already. From Chinedu Asadu. A decision by a bloc of West African nations to shut down their borders with Niger as a way of sanctioning the coup plotters is harming local businesses in northern Nigeria, where a cross-border economy has boomed for years. The bloc, known as ECOWAS, restricted financial transactions and shut down the borders between Niger and its member nations as part of the measures to stop the coup plotters to reinstate Nigerian President Mohamed Bazoum, who was overthrown last month by soldiers in his presidential guard. But the sting of the sanctions against the junta is being felt on the other side of the 1,600-kilometer long border in Nigeria. Niger accounts for 75% of the total value of exports from Nigeria's cross-border informal trade, according to a study by the Central Bank of Nigeria. The bank's latest report in 2016 valued goods traded across the border with Niger at 828 billion naira, or about $934 million a year. That's not an insignificant amount either. In Nigeria's northwestern Katsina state, the border closure and restricted traffic on nearby roads left dozens of trucks stranded for days, most of them loaded with food, items, and other perishable goods. Prices of livestock, animals, and some commodities usually supplied from the city of Maradi in Niger have increased, local residents said. Nigeria's authorities are enforcing the restriction of movement across the border, but the measures also impacted traffic in the surrounding area, including truck drivers not headed to Niger, but other border towns in Nigeria. Which is always great. If you have a problem with one state in your general region, do something that screws one of the other states that you have. And the last one we'll talk about on Niger, because we've got to talk Russia, because of course we do, from the BBC. Niger coup, Wagner taking advantage of instability, according to Anthony Blinken. I don't know why we're listening to him. He has proven over and over again, since the beginning of 2021, that he blows at his job. But apparently we're going to listen to him. Catherine Armstrong. Russia's Wagner mercenary group is taking advantage of instability in Niger, U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has told the BBC. The country has been ruled by a junta following the ousting of President Mohamed Bazoum nearly 2 weeks ago. There have been suggestions the coup leaders have asked for help from Wagner, which is known to be present in neighboring Mali. Mr. Blinken said he did not think Russia or Wagner instigated Niger's coup. However, the U.S. was worried about the group's possible manifesting itself in parts of the Sahel region, he told the BBC's Focus on Africa program. I think what happened and what continues to happen in Niger was not instigated by Russia or by Wagner, but they tried to take advantage of it. Yeah. Like you did in Yemen? Well, your predecessor. You were still a lawyer at the time. But like your predecessors tried to do in Yemen, and the United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia, and Afghanistan, and Pakistan, and Nepal, and China, and Taiwan. And if we want to reach really far back, East Germany, the Soviet states, a world superpower, or even a private contractor for military, or an arms dealer, or a nation that's an arms dealer, taking advantage of an unstable situation somewhere else in the world to make a profit, that's nothing new. The term hegemony is getting wings. Where'd you hear that first? John was the one that said it to me, John of the Porch Boys. And then, because I've got a bigger account than John was, I started pushing it. And yeah, it's starting to take off. Because people can see that, like, the Democrats, they're not worried about democracy. They're worried about keeping themselves in power. It's obvious. Just like Wagner taking advantage of the situation in Niger to go sell weapons and influence. No shit, Sherlock. The U.S. has been doing that for 70 years. Alright, let's come back stateside for just a bit. From the Wall Street Journal, Anheuser-Busch is selling Shock Top and Blue Point to a cannabis company, Tilray. Bud Light owner is selling 8 beer and beverage brands for undisclosed amount. I might have to go buy a shock top if that's the case. People don't have a word for the verb. Well, bird is the word. Papa Mau Mau, Papa Mau Mau Mau. Anheuser-Busch InBev is selling 8 beer and beverage brands, including Shock Top and Blue Point, to the cannabis company Tilray Brands for an undisclosed amount. The cannabis company's acquisitions, which also include brands such as Breckenridge Brewery, Red Hook Brewery, and Highball Energy, among others. The transaction includes breweries and brew pubs associated with these brands, as well as current employees. The purchase price will be paid in cash, and the transaction is expected to close this year, Tilray said. God, how do you come from the top of the beer world so big that you just go up and buy your competitors and continue selling their brands because you can, to selling off those brands again? Oh yeah, you make a can and then use the ensuing backlash to go insult your drinkers. Morons. Andy Thomas, president of the Anheuser-Busch unit that includes premium brands and craft brewers, said that Tilray reached out earlier this year expressing interest in the brands and breweries. Anheuser-Busch is still committed to the other craft beer brands in its portfolio, he said. Yeah, but for how much longer? The sale by Anheuser comes after the company in July laid off hundreds of workers at its U.S. offices after months of slumping sales of its Bud Light brands. Sales of Bud Light have tanked since April amid commercial backlash over the promotion with transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney earlier this year. Mexican brand Modelo Especial dethroned Bud Light as the top-selling beer in the U.S., which is hilarious because Modelo sucks. And all you have to do, of course, is apologize to your drinkers. I know a lot of people, too, like to come back out and say, well, this is because the evil conservatives couldn't handle Dylan Mulvaney being on the can. No, that's not it. It was what happened immediately after that, when Bud Light came out and said a statement that we're revamping our brand and we don't want to be the beer of frat boy and redneck America anymore. We want to be the beer of a higher class of people. You basically told your biggest consumer that we don't want your fucking business anymore. Get out of here. And they listened to you. Ambasayo, say ambasayo. I don't know that one. But man, how do you fall so far? Alright, follow-up story, but still, by the way, without a lot of explanation as to the how, from the USA Today. Car crashes in the second floor of Pennsylvania home. Photos show no injuries reported. From Natalie Nesa Alund. A house in central Pennsylvania sustained major damage after a car slammed into the second floor of the home, local emergency responders said. A photo posted by Junction Fire Company shows a gray Toyota Corolla wedged into an upstairs room with a portion of the car, including one of its back wheels and trunk, hanging off an awning. The wreck took place on Sunday night in Decatur Township, north of the city of Lewiston and about 60 miles northeast of Harrisburg. Crews with Junction Fire Company in Lewiston responded to a report of a vehicle crashing into a structure, and they said they arrived on the scene to find a vehicle stuck in the second floor of a home. The driver of the vehicle was outside the home. No injuries were reported by the department, which I can't for the life of me understand. To get that high into the air in 3,000 pounds of steel, okay, it's a Corolla, maybe 2,300 pounds of steel, means that you had to be booking. You had to be moving when you left the ground. And again, the thing that I can't understand and nobody seems to be answering to me is how? It's like the current junior senator from Wisconsin, Tammy Baldwin, being in the Senate. Nobody knows how she got there, and we just all know that she doesn't belong there. Oh, Quest Fanning's in here. Welcome. It's gonna get spicy here for a little bit, I think. Rescue crews said they stabilized the home and helped the homeowners put a tarp on the hole created by the vehicle. It was not immediately known if anyone was in the home during the crash or how the crash began. Yeah, that's what's blowing my mind about this. This paragraph right here. Or how the crash began. You had enough momentum to get 2,300 pounds of steel 10 feet in the air, and it looks like it was still on its up arc too, by the way, and the driver walked away without a scratch. I have questions. Alright. Now we gotta go talk about Trump. So let's get this over with. Georgia's happening. By the way, JoJo from Joy's was on her Paige Shill Twitter account earlier saying, "Oh, it's indictment day today. Oh, it's going to happen today. I feel it. It's not going to happen until the Biden admin needs something to distract from again," which, by the way, seems to be coming soon. I didn't put it on the stack because I was not able to find anything green check verified to back it up, but it does appear that Callisto is starting to drop a lot of video that's questioning the narrative of January the 6th. Which means that we will probably get indictment number 4 fairly soon, especially if that stuff starts to grab traction. This is from Rebecca Beach. All eyes are on Georgia this week, where yet another indictment of former President Trump is expected imminently. Fulton County DA Fani Willis has been probing Trump's efforts to interfere in the state's closely fought 2020 election for more than a year and is widely expected this month to bring the 4th indictment of 2023 against the former president. The work is accomplished, Willis told the local news outlets in Atlanta. "We've been working for 2.5 years. We're ready to go." Any charges brought by Willis would come after a federal indictment last week that was also connected to the 2020 election. In that case, the former president was charged with 4 counts for his role in trying to block the transfer of power. All bullshit charges. We've already debunked those here. It's not clear that Trump will face charges in the Georgia probe, though he has launched 3 separate suits seeking to quash Willis's investigation. At the same time, Georgia persecutors have a number of options to choose from should they decide to pursue a case against Trump. Mostly it looks like it's going to be RICO charges, and actually this will give me... We can skip the post-millennial article because that's what they were going to talk about too. Some experts say Willis may settle on racketeer influence and corrupt organizations charges in bringing a case against Trump. RICO statutes are typically used for organized crime, but the Georgia statute is broader than its federal counterpart and can be geared towards any enterprise, enabling the use of a statute for a wide variety of conduct. That's going to be a stretch if you're going to use racketeering for this, by the way. because you are going to need to put a lot of other people in indictment for that, and I don't think that she's going to do that. "15 minutes so you can cook your pork chop." Oh yeah, that's right, because you're in Mountain Time. It's an hour earlier there. Let's see. Doing so would help weave together different elements of the Trump campaign's efforts, connecting a plot carried out by numerous actors. It also would allow numerous conspirators to potentially be charged alongside the former president. Well, yeah, but I don't know that there's the interest to do that. That's the problem. When you have a criminal enterprise that includes a pattern of violations, that's inherently more serious and kind of separately serious than any individual criminal action, said Noah Bookbinder, president for Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, who also helped draft a model prosecution memo analyzing the case. Charging a RICO offense kind of captures that this is a multifaceted, larger plan. I think that's part of what the state, why that kind of statute exists. And it's part of why prosecutors may charge it. It also allows you to review lots of different conduct, but it allows you to present a case and present evidence that is a bigger scheme and not a couple of disparate events that could be dismissed as kind of a small individual action. This might be a reach. Well, 3 of the 4 charges in the DC federal case are a reach too, but this might be a reach. Mostly when I look at something like this, if this is the way that they're going to go with this, this is for them to come back out and say, would you really vote for a mob boss for the president? One thing I get to give Karine Jean is that she at least has real hair. I'll give credit to Giuliani for a prosecutor crafting the RICO laws. I don't know Mr. Baseball, by the way, so I don't know the reference of Strike 12. But, yep, we've got RICO laws coming. Kind of want to see how they do that and how many people they pull in with it. Because that's going to be a big, big, big case if they're going to go RICO. All right, on the DC side, security increases for judge assigned to Donald Trump's January 6th criminal case. No extra security for Kavanaugh and Barrett, I noticed, but Chutkan, oh yeah, I know we're going to do this one here. Again, this is a show of force. They're not actually going to, they don't think that anybody's going to come after Chutkan, but they can make the show of force and say that, oh my God, look at us. We've defeated the evil MAGA movement. We made our show. We put extra security and they didn't come. This is from Holmes Librand over at CNN. Security for the federal judge assigned to oversee the criminal case against former President Trump over his attempts to overturn the 2020 election have been increased in the federal courthouse in D.C. CNN has observed more security detail to Judge Tanya Chutkan, and Deputy U.S. Marshals discussed security plans for the judge on Monday. The U.S. Marshal Service handles security at the D.C. District Court, and a spokesperson for the services said it takes that responsibility very seriously. My big question here is, when exactly does Eileen Cannon's address get leaked? First time my mom saw him on IRL, she saw him shaking hands at a Bishop Laughlin high school game. While my dad was a year behind, she asked, "Who's that guy?" And my dad said, "Oh, that twerp." Giuliani? I don't know. Ensuring that judges can rule independently and free from harm or intimidation is paramount to the rule of law, unless it happens to be Brett Kavanaugh. And a fundamental mission of the U.S. Marshal Service, spokesperson Drew J. Wade told CNN, while we do not discuss our specific security measures, we continuously review the measures in place to take appropriate steps to ensure the integrity of the federal judiciary process. What a load of crap. Wow. The uptick in security inside the courthouse comes after a security measure, including fencing and yellow tape, were taken down following Trump's arraignment last week. That hearing, where Trump pleaded not guilty, was presided over by Magistrate Judge Chuck Ken, takes the case from there. Trump has already said he will be asking for Chuck Ken to recuse herself from the case, writing on social media in all caps. And CNN has to put that it's in all caps. There's no way I can get a fair trial with a judge assigned to the ridiculous freedom of speech, fair elections case. His lawyers told him to say that, by the way. He has no idea. Trump has already said he will be, federal prosecutors will be asking for a protective order restricting what Trump and his team can do with the evidence shared with them through discovery in the 2020 election case. These are not first-year law students. Prosecutors point to Trump's public statements, and they say could have a harmful, chilling effect on witnesses or adversely affect the fair administration of justice in this case. Again, it's all for show. Everything that they're doing here is for show. I don't know why this article is all the way down here. And let's do the Judge Cannon stuff that we didn't get to yesterday. From the Post-Millennial to start with, breaking. Judge Cannon denies Jack Smith's motion to file documents in Trump's doc case under seal. Which is good because, well, let's face it. The defense has the right to see these documents and craft a defense over them. This is from Hannah Nightingale. In a court brief signed by Eileen Cannon on Monday, she denied special counsel Jack Smith's request to file documents in Trump's classified documents case under seal. Cannon wrote that Smith had moved to file under seal a supplement containing additional information to facilitate the court's inquiry into the case of Trump's alleged retaining classified documents. The special counsel states in conclusory terms that the supplement should have been sealed from public view to comport with grand jury secrecy. But the motion for leave and supplement plainly fell to satisfy the burden of establishing sufficient legal or factual basis to warrant sealing the motion and supplement, Cannon wrote. Cannon also requested information from prosecutors regarding the continued use of an out-of-state grand jury to investigate the case. We'll be talking about that in just a moment. Among other topics raised in the motion, the response shall address the legal propriety of using an out-of-state district grand jury proceeding to continue to investigate and or to seek post-indictment hearings on matters pertinent to the instant indicted matter of this district, she continued on the brief. So, good. And the document is here, by the way, and I will put this Post-Millennial article in general chat in the Discord. If you guys want to go back and have a look at it, read through it yourself. It is 2 pages long. From Axios, judge overseeing Trump documents case criticizes special counsel. From Ivana Sarik. We're doing on time, by the way. Yeah, we got time yet. The judge overseeing former President Trump's classified documents case on Monday rebuked federal prosecutors and struck 2 of their filings. Florida Judge Eileen Cannon, a Trump appointee, also demanded an explanation of the legal propriety using an out-of-state district grand jury proceeding to continue to investigate and or seek post-indictment hearings on matters pertinent to the instant indicted matter of the district. We'll be talking about that later. In the filing, Cannon responded to the prosecution's request for a hearing on potential conflicts of interest concerning Trump defendant Walt Nauta's lawyer, Stanley Woodward. A potential conflict exists because Mr. Woodward previously represented one witness and currently represents two other witnesses, who the government may call to testify at the trial of his client, Nauta. Prosecutors wrote in a court filing last week. The situation could leave Woodward in a position of cross-examining past or current clients. Prosecutors added. Nauta's lawyers will need to respond to the motion for the hearing and address the existence of the grand jury. By August 17th, Cannon wrote in the filing on Monday. What a slimy, slippery tactic, by the way. You are guaranteed the right to legal counsel by the Constitution, by the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. To have somebody intercede if the government is coming down on you, to whatever you can find or whoever it is that you can afford. And if you cannot, the court will go as far as to give you and appoint you a lawyer. But the prosecution is going to do everything that they can to make sure that no respectable lawyer will take up Nauta's case, and instead he's going to get stuck with some ambulance chaser. The federal grand jury in Miami indicted Trump on charges. Superseding indictment in July levied additional charges in the documents case. A separate grand jury in D.C. indicted Trump on 4 counts last week over alleged efforts to overturn the 2020 election. What a slimy, slimy move. I hate Jack Smith. I can't stand that dude. NPC News trying to discredit Cannon, because that's going to be the story of the day for a while. Quest Fanning says, had a conversation with my buddy Kevin, a retired big gun on Wall Street, about Giuliani's fall, and he said it was mostly because Giuliani had become a big-time alcoholic. Mind you, Kevin and I had plenty of drinks together, so when he says Rudy is a drunk, well, I don't know that it was necessarily alcohol and alcoholism. I think he just got old. He's no spring chicken. What is he, like, 80? Late 70s, early 80s, maybe? I think that plays a big part in it. Eileen Cannon, the judge in the Trump documents case, made multiple errors in an earlier trial. Coming to NPC from Reuters. The judge in the former president's upcoming trial over his handling of classified documents made 2 key errors in a June trial, one of which violated a fundamental constitutional right of the defendant and could have invalidated the proceedings according to legal experts and a court transcript. Eileen Cannon closed jury selection for the trial of an Alabama man accused by federal prosecutors of running a website with images of child sex abuse to the defendant's family and the general public. A trial transcript obtained by Reuters showed a defendant's right to a public trial is enshrined in the U.S. Constitution's Sixth Amendment. Cannon, a 42-year-old former federal prosecutor appointed to Trump to the bench in 2020 late in his presidency, also neglected to swear in the prospective jury pool, an obligatory procedure in which people who may serve on the panel pledge to tell the truth. During the selection process, the error forced Cannon to restart the jury selection before the trial ended abruptly with defendant William Spearman pleading guilty as part of an agreement with prosecutors. Cannon's decision to close the courtroom represents a fundamental constitutional error, said Stephen Smith, a professor at the Santa Clara School of Law in California. She ignored the public trial right entirely. It's as though she didn't know it existed. In Cannon's decision to close the jury selection, the judge cited space restrictions in her small courtroom at the federal courthouse in Fort Pierce, Florida. Legal experts said closing a courtroom to the public has been recognized by the Supreme Court as a structural error, a mistake so significant it can invalidate a criminal trial because it strikes at the heart of the entire process. A public trial has also been found to implicate First Amendment rights of freedom of assembly, speech, and the press. And the only reason they're doing this is because she is trying Trump. This would have been, by the way, a slap on the wrist from the judiciary, a reminder not to do it again, and completely ignored if she was not on this trial. And yes, she probably still would have done the same thing. I would bet a lot of first-timers on the federal bench have made mistakes like this. I would almost guarantee it. But it's only a big deal because she was the randomly chosen one to try Trump. "80% of criminal defense are represented by a public defender." I have been. And I was scared shitless. The reason that I have a lawyer on retainer right now is because I was scared to death of what would happen under a public defender ever again in my life. I got lucky the first time and walked out with restitution and nothing else. I got damn lucky. That was when I sat in front of Judge Schrader, by the way. He was a lot younger then than he was during the Rittenhouse trial, but I mean, to be fair, so was I. God, that was 20 years before the Rittenhouse trial. 19, almost 20. Cannon's decision raises questions about how she will handle the intense public interest at Trump's trial, which is scheduled to begin on May 20th, 2024 in the same courtroom. Well, she'll keep the courtroom open. It will only be able to handle a certain number of people, and that'll be that. But yes, they are definitely looking to invalidate this person as much as they can. And the last one that we're going to go over, I think that'll be what we finish on today too, before we go into the rules of acquisition, of course, comes to us from The Hill. Judge Cannon questions the use of out-of-state grand jury in Mar-a-Lago investigation. From Rebecca Beach. Judge Cannon on Monday asked the DOJ to explain its use of an out-of-state grand jury to the Mar-a-Lago case. The demand came in response to a duel of filings submitted under seal, which Cannon directed a clerk to strike from the docket. The DOJ shall address the legal propriety of using an out-of-state district grand jury proceeding to continue to investigate and/or seek post-indictment hearings on matters pertinent to the instant indicted matter in this district, she wrote. While the Mar-a-Lago case is being handled out of her Fort Pierce, Florida courtroom, much of the grand jury work ahead of the indictment was conducted through a Washington, D.C. grand jury. The order comes as Special Counsel Jack Smith has requested a conference with former President Trump co-defendant Walt Nauta, warning that his attorney in the matter, Stanley Woodward, may not be able to provide sufficient representation. Trump noted that Woodward is representing other witnesses in the case. The DOJ is requesting a so-called Garcia hearing with Woodward's clients to inform them of potential risks and inquire about possible waivers, noting the court could provide an additional independent counsel to Nauta to assess whether he's being fairly represented by Woodward. Yeah, I do have a question about that too, and of course the armchair lawyers on Twitter, or X as it's now called, will come and tell you to stop asking questions about it and not worry about it. And you're being a bigot if you think that a grand jury in D.C. can't throw a charge in Florida. They can, and I did do a little bit of research on this. It's fairly unprecedented for them to do so, but it is legal for them to do. And it would have, at that point, also been more appropriate to have a grand jury in Miami, in the district, or Mar-a-Lago, or Palm Beach, rather, in that district, bring the charges forward. So they didn't necessarily break any rules for doing it. It's not something that's very often done. And of course, I question the audacity of doing it too, because, I mean, the Mar-a-Lago case didn't happen in D.C. Why are they using a D.C. grand jury? Except for a guarantee of charges being brought forward. Quest Fanning says, Giuliani is 79. My dad is 77 and went to college right after he turned 17. My dad, Ed, is turning 77 and sharp as a tack. He also goes 20 to 30 miles a day on a bicycle during the summer. Genes help. If I'm going to be a got, I might as well be a big got. Alright, that's all the news that we have for the day, partially because I'm hungry. That's how I make most of my decisions in life. Because I'm hungry, let's look at the rules of acquisition and head out of here for the day. I've had a lot of these. We're coming to the end. I gotta find a new fandom to look at. Because we're drawing to the close of this list. Where did we leave off? Ah, yes, the 212th rule of acquisition. A good lie is easier to believe than the truth. That's where we left off, which means that our next one, as there's new 213th rather in canon, alpha or beta, brings us to the 214th rule of acquisition. Never begin a business negotiation on an empty stomach. This is from the DS9 episode The Maquis, Part 1. It's an interesting take on this, and especially going cross-species. You make the assumption, of course, that the Ferengi biologically operate similarly to the same as humans. Whereas, if they get hungry, their judgment is clouded, they may not make the best decisions, or as like I'm thinking, and this is perfect for what I just said, by the way. They may make a decision based on the fact that they're hungry, based on what is, or rather than based on what is best for profit. And I know we're getting close to the 2-hour mark because I'm starting to talk like Joe Biden, man. Come on, man. But, I mean, realistically, you shouldn't begin the negotiations on an empty stomach. Wow, I really am getting tongue-tied as we go here. If you're going to negotiate with something, grab some dinner or a nice lunch. Something just to take the edge off, even if you don't want to be in there completely bloated either. Or grab a little something to take the edge off, get some food in your belly, and then you'll focus more on what's actually on the table rather than, hey, how soon can I get out of here and go have a snack? Or dinner or something. What's always nice is, of course, when your business opportunities and negotiations have food provided, but even still, you should be starting off with having something already in there. Then you don't gorge yourself in front of the people you're trying to negotiate with. A little bit of light snacking and a little bit of light conversation over the snacking will go a long way. But I mean, if you're stuffing down pork chops like they're going out of style and you're never going to see a pig again, the people you're negotiating with are not going to take you seriously. So, the 214th rule of acquisition: never begin a business negotiation on an empty stomach. Take that forward, and maybe you too can enter the divine treasury after death. Let's see, what do we got here? We'll just have to make up our own. Quest says, you're the man, Ed. I wish I had more evening time free to hang with you. Well, there's going to be, and we'll talk about it in the outro, but something new coming up here too. But that's not going to be live streamed. I already made that decision. That can be the first unwritten rule. Quest says, idea, clips of every rule is YouTube shorts that drive traffic. Yeah, but again, I'm working 50 to 70 hours a week right now. Keep that in mind. I need to hire somebody to go back and do my clips. Quest Fanning says, earlier today I saw a large Twitter account say that Bernie had died yesterday. I mean, that's within the realm of believability. He's 82 years old. Had some awesome food before convention and more after from a key vendor. Maybe a few drinks. Well, it's Quest Fanning. I know it's a few drinks. At a convention a few weeks ago. Alright, let's head out of here. Let's finish off. Put some outro music up here. From the wonderful Stephen Ignoramus. Alright. Well, we're done. We're out of here. We got some of the... I think we are caught up with the Trump trial drama, which is good because, again, after the first couple times, it's getting old at this point. Oh, yay, they're going to go indict him again. They're going to go find something else to indict him again over. Oh, wow. Look at that. But we got through a lot of it. We'll be back here tomorrow night at 6 p.m. Central Time to look at more of what's happening in the news, more of what's happening in the headlines, and more of what is happening in the next 22 hours. So looking forward to seeing you guys here. A reminder from the top of the show, number one, you can catch this episode in a couple hours on the audio platforms, Spotify. And they'll actually be up to Spotify before it gets up to being processed on YouTube. I don't know how fast Rumble processes, but YouTube will not process this before most of us go to bed tonight. But you can go catch us on Spotify in the next couple hours for sure. And a new venture is going to be coming in the near future. Definitely more talking, less politics, and more topics. Fanning, I actually might want to have you on for this one here because of your thoughts on homeschool. But I was listening to Bridget Fetisi the other day and thinking to myself, I want to do something non-political and still get to know people and what their journeys are. But more details on that, including a working title, if we can get one figured out. I got headed out of here for the night. Take care. Have a good night. Stick around if you're on Twitch for the raid, and we will see you next time. And until then, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.